Let's have a talk now to Tim Maltin. He's an author, historian and TV presenter and one of the world's leading experts on the Titanic wreck. Good morning to you, Tim.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I wish it was under happier circumstances. You've heard me reading out that tweet from the US Coast Guard's Northeast Command. Gave us all, I think, a lot of hope, given that time is running out, and not just to find the sub, but to find the sub and get it, if it is still underwater, to the surface in time before the oxygen runs out. All of that, of course, assuming that the sub will be found and that the men are still alive right now. Tell us your reaction to what we heard from Dr. Chris Parry and that tweet, which did raise some hopes.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear that clearly the crew are still alive. They're doing making a noise every 30 minutes on the dot, as it were. The problem for them and for all of us worried about their safety is that this is so deep. It's 3,500 meters. It's almost 2.5 miles down at the bottom of the seabed in the pitch darkness. Not only is it like looking for a needle in a haystack blindfolded, but it's also actually a situation where there's no other sub that's in the area that can operate at that depth that's big enough to actually recover the whole sub. So even if they find the stricken vessel, I don't see at the moment how they're going to be able to affect any sort of sub-to-sub transfer of human life.
Well, listen, we spoke to, as you mentioned, a caller who operates remote operated vehicles at the ocean floor a little bit earlier, and he's based in Norway, and he was saying that actually his understanding that there are now vessels that have made it to the search scene, which do have a capability, certainly of laying and recalling cables, as they do have that sort of grab mechanism, and they're hoping that if they are able to identify where the sub is, and if they could send another sub down to somehow lay hold of it, they would be able to pull it to the surface, and it would just take an hour to get that sub to the surface if they could find it. But this is the issue, as you say, so far down, pitch black. It's not just sort of, having a look for something at the bottom of a swimming pool. This is an extraordinarily big endeavour, and we know that even the search, the area they're searching has been widened. Really, the best hope of finding these men alive would be as if they were on the surface already, isn't it? But then many experts have told us that realistically, if it was already on the surface, they would find it. But this is just a tiny 21-foot sub. High seas, bad conditions would make that, again, you could be a mile away from that sub on the surface and not be able to see it.
That's right. It's quite possible that the submarine is actually caught in fishing nets or in a part of the wreckage, because drag nets do get caught in Titanic's wreck. They're known as ghost nets, and they can snag submersibles. But if they could somehow get free and jettison their ballast, which is either rocks or metal, then they could have a 2.5-hour rise to the surface. And then there's a small chance that in daylight hours, they could be picked up by a helicopter flying overhead. But even then, this cabin can only be opened from the outside. Yeah. So even if they were bobbing on the surface, the unfortunate explorers inside would not be able to free themselves.
I mean, that is where this becomes a horror movie, not just a disaster movie, doesn't it? And the idea also that presumably with it being pressurised, even if they could open it, that would kill them straight away anyway, because they would be going from, was it 40 atmospheres pressure, well, to protect themselves, 40 atmosphere pressure that far down, back to atmospheric temperature. But also, as a guest pointed out, that the submersible would almost instantly be full of water and would sink, and they wouldn't have anything to hold on to. You seemed very confident earlier about that the crew could still be alive. These banging noises, and certainly a regular banging noise, that would be something that would be a clear signal this isn't an irregular sound. But as our guest pointed out a bit earlier, former Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Parry, that you're talking about a carbon fibre hull. Even if you were able to make a banging noise on it, if they were still alive, that would create a very dull sound. It wouldn't be the sort of sound that could be picked up by an aircraft, thousands of feet above the water and above the surface of the water, let alone with the thousands of feet of the water in between. And that is just simply very unlikely. It's more likely to be, some metal movement in the Titanic.
Well, as I understand it, this sound has actually been picked up by sonar buoys, which have been dropped into the water. So I think that it is quite possible that these sounds do originate from human life, and they do have until Thursday of oxygen. But I do agree with you and other callers on this show that I think sadly, we could be looking at another 5 victims of the Titanic tragedy, which occurred 111 years ago this year.
Indeed, some people are raising concerns about, obviously, the obvious safety concerns about this vehicle, the sub, and whether or not there was enough safety mechanisms around it, and sort of, if this goes wrong, what happens? There doesn't seem to be any sort of fail-safe mechanisms. But also, there's been concerns raised about, I suppose, the sort of death tourism. This is a wreck in which, many people lost their lives, and the appropriateness of people going down there. Look, you're an expert on the Titanic. Do you think there's any issue with people going down to visit this wreck, other than the safety issues for themselves?
Well, there's 2 issues. If there's too much tourism down there, then as these subs drop their ballast to be able to rise to the surface, they basically drop metal and rocks around the debris field of Titanic. And there have been stories even of them being dropped on and through the decks of Titanic. So as the rust weakens over time with the salt water, obviously those subs present a greater and greater danger to the fabric that remains of Titanic. But for me, the main concern is one of safety. And previous expeditions, such as the 1985 trip, where Bob Ballard rather brilliantly found the Titanic, they were sponsored by the US Navy and had Navy equipment. Whereas this is a commercial sub, and it does look a little bit like it's been sort of, improvised, shall we say?
It does, doesn't it?
That's right, and I think we need better regulation so that you are not allowed just to sign your life away and go on a commercial tourist expedition.
Yeah,
to
well,
the
especially
Titanic.
as the Coast Guard and taxpayers' money is being used in America and Canada to try and rescue these men. There may be other risks to other people's lives from that attempt to rescue. Is this something you would ever do? Would you ever go down in a sub like this?
Well, now I wouldn't, but before this accident, I think if someone had paid me to go down, or rather,
don't have the spare $250,000. Yes,
correct. Yeah, not just today. So I think I might have done, but I think this is a warning to everyone of how dangerous it is. It's a bit like space tourism. It's a bit like going to the moon. Once you're down on the seabed, you're completely cut off from life on the surface.
Absolutely. Tim Maltin, really good to talk to you, to get your expertise, author, historian, and one of the world's leading experts on the Titanic.